Hi, my name is Matt Candler. I'm the founder of 4.0 Schools, and I want to tell you a little bit about where we're headed and why. I want to start with this one question. What if we made lots of little bets and many more people earlier than we do right now in education? I think that's the framing question that we have been asking ourselves for a few years, and we're really committed to answering that in the affirmative here at 4.0. So over time, our programming has tightened up and clarified itself in these two very discrete investments in folks who are curious about the future of school. Essentials is a 3-day workshop that allows folks to develop a pop-up version of their idea. And I've stolen this language from the food industry, which is just a place I like stealing ideas from. And I think it's a really concrete concept that regardless of who you are, where you are today, whether you're a student, whether you have kids in school, whether you're an educator, whether you're outside of education traditionally, but have an idea about making school better for all kids, this is a way for you to deliver a version of that. It might be a crappy version. It might be a cheap, quick version, but it is an actual attempt to get in front of students and families for a day, a half day, a few hours, and try something better. So Essentials is a program that helps you prepare for that, to do it in a thoughtful way, to make that first pop-up version of a school or a learning space or a tool that families and students can use as good as it can be, but to get it out the door as quick as you can get it out the door. The Tiny Fellowship is a follow-on program that builds on pop-ups, that builds on that iterative process that you're creating with real live families and students, and gives you the skills to create an extended pilot. If I stuck with that food metaphor, kind of like the food truck version of your school or learning space or learning tool. You can do this program without quitting your job. And changing our program from one that required you to quit your job to one that doesn't has transformed many things about 4.0 that I'll get to in a little bit. There are 3 things that we think increasingly, these are not exhaustive of what school could be, but these are 3 topics that we're really curious about, that we want over time, each successive wave of Essentials and Tiny Fellows graduates to be working on, to be thinking about. Let me just tell you about these real quickly. The first are inclusive micro schools. Public schools, low-cost private schools, maybe even homeschool collectives that could develop learning communities that we consider to be small based on current and old standards. The reason why I want to keep schools small are twofold. One, in my experience of building schools, when you get to around 150, 200 kids, you start to layer in administrative overhead with good intentions, but often by putting more and more adults further and further away from kids. Keeping schools small eliminates that overhead. The other thing it does is if we looked at Robin Dunbar's research on how many relationships most of us can handle, he says about 153, about how many folks we can keep track of. And if we were able to limit schools to that size, what if that actually allowed us to push on student-to-student learning? Maybe the big constraint in schools being too large is that students can't reach one another because the school is too big. So if there's one thing core to the micro school concept, the smallness is that we constrain it so that students might teach one another. We also focus very intently on schools that are inclusive by design. It doesn't have to be a public school, it could be a private school, but if it is, it has to be accessible socioeconomically to the entire city. The second piece of the puzzle for me are what I call personalized learning spaces. These are places where education happens at a very high level in a space that is not the school of record for a child, but where an educator, maybe someone with a non-traditional background, is able to deliver incredibly high quality learning to a child and then is able to serve kids not just in new schools that we're building, but in existing schools. So unlike a new school that might take upwards of, say, 2 years to create, this takes 2 years sometimes, we can get these things open very quickly, in a month, in a few weeks. And they can serve kids in existing schools right now, tomorrow. Increasingly, technology is allowing us to build these certainly on site, but in mobile labs and maybe even virtually. The third piece of the puzzle, I think, is critical that we understand. For so long, we have assumed that if we just build great schools, families will come. But economic mobility, geographic mobility, networks, cultural norms, the way we communicate with one another, these are huge barriers for so many families. And so actively building tools that allow us to redistribute soft power, to acknowledge that there is structural privilege and barriers depending on your zip code, on your skin color. We want entrepreneurs to build tools that push back on these structural problems, that create equity in the tools that empower families who may not have them by nature of birth or zip code or family heritage. We want families exercising choice more often than just once a year, picking amongst school models that too often, frankly, are just alike. So this third category of educational technology and maybe even low-tech tools is designed to acknowledge that school today is not equitable, that we have not given every child and every family an equal chance, and we want folks building tools that change that. Some examples. You can buzz through and pause the video. The bonus of pausing is you don't have to hear my voice, and get some examples of inclusive microschools, personalized learning spaces, and tools that we think are allowing more folks to make better choices more often. So again, our view is that in the future, children might have a better chance at more options, higher quality options, in a world where the boundary between schools and personalized learning spaces is porous, and kids can move back and forth between their home school and a space, a wide ecosystem of options, both locally, on the ground, and virtually. And we really believe that there's this third piece of the puzzle that a group of entrepreneurs needs to start building to make the future of school accessible to everyone. So that's what we're thinking about and what we are really challenging folks who are in our community over the next few years to help us with. Punch holes in this theory. Tell me where I'm missing things. Help me understand what we can do. Along with that theory, I also want to challenge you to invite more people to be a part of this community. We have been working hard at trying to understand the structural barriers in our own programming and our own mindsets. And one major shift we made was to make the Tiny Fellowship a don't quit your job yet format. And we're really thrilled with the number of folks, and more importantly, the diversity of folks who are stepping up to build the future of school in this new format. But I'm really excited about this, and I think we are always fighting to make sure we are self-aware about what we're doing. How are we blocking folks from being participants in the future as builders? I'm very interested in that, and we're constantly working on it. We need your help. One way we are pushing back against our own barriers, my own blindness, is to tell stories. And so we have launched this year the blog futureofschool.org, where you'll hear me blab on about what we're thinking about in horrible metaphors about food and others. And then you'll hear much more precise requests from Hassan, who leads the Tiny Investments team, drilling down into each of these three categories on ideas that we think folks should pursue. And then finally, and much more exciting, you get to hear real stories from the folks who are building the future of school in our community all around the country right now. I can't tell you how exciting some of these stories are. You should be there reading it daily. So lastly, as I wrap up, why are we doing this? The reason why 4.0 exists is because for too long, and I myself personally have been a part of this, we've had a small tent. We've used the same ideas over and over again, and we have recklessly tested them, if we've tested them at all, too late. But what if we built a future where we had more folks in the tent with us? That it was one of those giant wedding tents that cover the whole country, that everyone felt that they were a part, that there was an invite to being a part of building the future of school. We would have better ideas, informed by families, students who are actually a part of school today, not folks who are disconnected or professionals who are struggling with the structures they work in. So we could put ideas out there that are rooted in the reality of educating kids today. And more importantly, what we are really pushing on is make those tests of those ideas earlier and more often. And in so doing, we actually create a community where everyone's involved in the testing, and trying new ideas becomes something human again. It doesn't become some giant experiment done to a community, but it's done at a human, small, personal level where everyone feels like they are actually a part of it. And you can inform that test because it is a small, intimate, and human test. So for us, that's where school could go. That's where the future of school might be. We aren't certain of this. These are strong beliefs. They are weakly held, and we need you to be a part of our community, pushing us, helping us make them better, challenging us, and building a piece of the future of school yourself. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for taking a few minutes to be with me. I really look forward to hearing from you and hearing how you think the future of school might be better too. Thanks again.